I never thought the man I married would become the reason I stopped trusting people. When we first met, he seemed like everything I'd ever wanted: kind, charming, patient. He had this way of making me feel safe, like I could finally exhale after years of being strong on my own. He knew I had been through a rough divorce before, and he promised to be different. I believed him. We blended our lives, our families, our finances, everything. I let him into my world, into my heart, and into my bank account. But little by little, things started to shift. Not suddenly, not in a way that screamed danger. More like small cracks that slowly deepened over time. I started noticing that money was going missing. At first, I told myself it was just the bills, or maybe I had miscalculated something. But then larger sums disappeared. He always had an explanation: repairs, business expenses, helping out a friend in need. I wanted to believe him. But the numbers didn't lie. At the same time, something even worse was happening. My stepchildren, who once hugged me goodnight and called me Mom, started pulling away. They wouldn't talk to me like they used to. They stopped joining in for family dinners. One of them even accused me of things I'd never said or done. It was like someone had been whispering poison into their ears. I found myself standing in my own home, feeling like an outsider, like a villain in a story I didn't even recognize. Eventually, I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. The financial betrayal, the broken trust, the coldness of children I had helped raise, it all pointed back to him. And when I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just got angry. That was the moment I knew I had to make a choice. So I threw him out. I locked the doors, changed the passwords, and began the long process of untangling my life from his. But I didn't stop there. What he didn't know was that I had been keeping records. Every bank statement. Every email. Every strange conversation. I knew that one day, I might need to speak the truth in a place where lies couldn't hide, in court. And 3 years later, I did just that. I stood in front of a judge and told the world who he really was. I revealed everything. The money. The manipulation. The way he turned his own children against someone who loved them. It should have been the end of the story. But life has a strange sense of timing. Just when I thought I'd finally moved on, I got a message: he'd been in an accident. And now, he was asking me for help. Me, the woman he tried to break. Me, the one he betrayed. And here's where the story takes a turn I never saw coming. When I first saw his name pop up on my phone, my stomach dropped. It had been years, 3, to be exact, since I'd heard his voice or seen his face. I didn't even save his number. But I knew it was him. There was something about seeing his name again that made everything I thought I had healed from come rushing back. I almost didn't answer. A big part of me wanted to block him and pretend he never existed. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made me tap on that message. He said he'd been in a car accident. His words were short, almost emotionless, but there was a strange undertone of desperation. He said he had no one else. That his family wasn't speaking to him. That he couldn't even walk on his own anymore. And then he said the one thing that truly got under my skin. "You're still my wife in my heart." I laughed out loud when I read that. Not because it was funny, but because it was so wildly disconnected from reality. This was the same man who emptied our joint savings account behind my back. The same man who twisted stories to make me look like the bad guy in my own home. The same man who sat in a courtroom, staring straight ahead, as I recounted every painful thing he had done. And now he wanted help? But here's the thing, I needed answers too. Even though I had moved on, built a more peaceful life, there were things I never got closure on. Why did he do it? Why go so far to break something that didn't need fixing? And why now, after all this time, was he crawling back? I started thinking about the final year we were together. The way he would disappear for hours with vague excuses. The lies he told with a calm face, like he believed them himself. There were late-night phone calls he'd step outside to take. Secret messages I wasn't supposed to see. And I remembered the strange tension that always hung in the air around his friends, like there were things they knew that I didn't. I used to chalk it up to my own insecurities. But now, looking back, it all felt like part of something bigger. There were also the kids. His kids. My stepchildren. I had loved them as if they were my own. I never tried to replace their mother. I just tried to be someone they could count on. But suddenly they wouldn't even look at me. They said I was controlling, too strict, and manipulative, words I knew didn't come from their mouths originally. Words I suspected were planted. What else had he told them? What lies had he woven while I was busy trying to hold the family together? Now he was alone, injured, and reaching out to the person he'd once tried to destroy. And I had a decision to make. Not just whether or not to help him, but whether or not I was ready to face all the buried truths I had tried so hard to leave behind. Because something told me this accident wasn't just bad luck. Something told me that this was just the beginning of another story, one I wasn't ready for. Not yet. For days I didn't respond to his message. I read it over and over, sometimes in the middle of the night, trying to make sense of why he would come back now, why he would even think I'd still care. But the truth is, something inside me stayed unsettled. Not because I wanted to help him. Not because I still had feelings for him. But because deep down, I knew I never got the full story. And maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally find out what had really been going on all those years ago. While I wrestled with my thoughts, I started getting messages from my former stepdaughter, Lily. She hadn't spoken to me since the divorce. Not a word. Back then, she was only 14, caught between what she saw and what she was told. Now, she was 17, older, and maybe starting to question things on her own. Her message was short, just a, "Hey, I heard about Dad. Can we talk?" My heart raced reading it. I didn't know if she wanted to reconnect or accuse me of something else. But I agreed to meet her for coffee. When she showed up, she looked different, taller, more mature, but her eyes were still the same. Nervous, guarded. She sat down across from me and said, "I don't know what happened between you and Dad, but I think he lied to us. A lot." That was the moment I felt something shift. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the damage he'd done to all of us. The lies, the manipulation, the control. Lily said that after I left, things got worse at home. He started drinking more. He was always angry. He told them I abandoned them, that I never cared about them, that I had been stealing from the family. And they believed him. Until the pieces stopped adding up. I asked her why she believed me now, after all this time. She looked down at her coffee and said quietly, "Because I remember how safe I felt when you were around. And I haven't felt that way since." That nearly broke me. But it also fueled something inside me. A need to uncover the truth, to understand why he worked so hard to tear everything apart. What was he hiding? Why drain the accounts? Why ruin our home? Back then, I thought it was just about control. Or money. But now I wasn't so sure. There had always been whispers, about some shady business deals, some debts he owed, people calling at odd hours. I once found a stack of cash hidden in his office drawer, wrapped in rubber bands and stuffed inside a box labeled "Old Photos." He brushed it off like it was nothing. But now I wondered. And now, with him injured and vulnerable, I was in a position to start asking questions he couldn't dodge. But I had to be careful. If I stepped back into his life, even for a moment, I had to do it on my terms. Because whatever secrets he'd buried, money, lies, betrayal, I had a feeling they were about to resurface. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might find. A week later, I found myself standing outside the rehab center where he was staying. I didn't tell anyone I was going, not even Lily. Part of me felt like I was walking into a trap. The other part just needed answers. The center was quiet, almost too quiet, with the kind of stillness that made you question everything. I signed in at the front desk, gave them his name, and waited. When he rolled into the visiting room in a wheelchair, I barely recognized him. He looked older, thinner, and something in his face had changed, like life had knocked the wind out of him and left him hollow. He smiled when he saw me. A weak, tired smile. "You came," he said, like it was the most surprising thing in the world. I didn't sit down. I just looked at him. "Why now?" I asked. "Why me?" He looked away, eyes flickering toward the floor. "Because there's no one else," he said. "And because I owe you the truth." That stopped me. I wasn't sure what truth he was talking about, but I could feel the air thicken. He told me things started falling apart after the divorce. That people he owed money to started showing up. That the business he claimed to own was really just a front, and everything was falling apart long before I left. I asked him about the missing money, the strange calls, the sudden cash hidden in boxes. He didn't deny it. He just said, "I thought I could fix it before you found out." But it was what he said next that made my stomach twist. He admitted he used the kids as leverage, turning them against me because he knew they were my soft spot. He said it was the only way to make me doubt myself, to keep me distracted while he cleaned out the accounts and tried to disappear. "You were the only one who paid attention," he said. "You noticed things no one else did." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how he could sit there and say it so plainly, like it was a business deal gone wrong instead of a betrayal that shattered our family. But then he said something I didn't expect. "I think they're coming back." "Who?" I asked, my voice suddenly sharp. "The men I owed," he said. "They found me once. I don't think they'll stop now. And I thought if something happened to me, maybe you could tell the kids the truth." That's when everything hit me. This wasn't just about his lies or the money anymore. This went deeper. Someone out there knew things I didn't, maybe things he hadn't even said yet. And now, whatever he had been running from was starting to catch up. I left the center that day with more questions than answers. But I knew one thing for sure, something was coming. And whether I liked it or not, I was already in the middle of it. 2 nights after that visit, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was just after 2 a.m. and the name on the screen stopped my breath. Lily. I picked up immediately, my voice groggy but alert. "Lily? What's wrong?" She was whispering, panicked. "Someone was outside the house," she said. "I saw them through the window. I think they were watching us." I shot out of bed. "Did you call the police?" "I did. They came and looked around, but the person was gone by then. They said it was probably nothing, but... Mom, I don't think it was random." She hadn't called me Mom in years. I didn't even stop to think. I told her to pack a bag and wait for me. Within 30 minutes, I was in the car, driving faster than I should have been, heart racing with every mile. As I drove, the pieces started clicking into place. The timing. The warnings. His strange request for me to tell the kids the truth. Whatever he had gotten himself involved in, it wasn't over. When Lily got into the car, she was shaking. I wrapped my arm around her and promised she'd be safe. But inside, I didn't feel certain about anything. I took her back to my place, locked all the doors, double-checked every window, and sat in the living room with the lights off, watching for movement outside. My mind raced. If someone had been watching her, was I next? The next morning, I got another message. Not from him, but from an unknown number. It was just a picture. A photo of the rehab center. A shot of the window from the outside, and through the blinds, his wheelchair was clearly visible. No caption. No explanation. Just the image. My hands went cold. I sent the photo to the police, but they didn't take it seriously. They said without a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. I felt helpless, but I also felt something else, a sudden, growing fear that I didn't know the whole story, not even close. I decided to visit him again, this time with Lily. She agreed, reluctantly. When we walked into his room, his face went pale. "You brought her here?" he said, almost like he was afraid. That reaction told me everything. "What aren't you telling me?" I demanded. "Who are these people? Why are they watching her? He looked at Lily, then at me, and then finally said, Because I didn't just owe them money. I owed them silence. My heart sank. This wasn't just about debts. This was about secrets, dangerous ones. Things that could ruin lives if they ever got out. And somehow, by coming back into this, I'd opened a door that should have stayed shut. Then he looked at Lily and said something I'll never forget. They're not after me anymore. They're after her. And just like that, everything changed. For a few seconds, the room felt like it stopped breathing. I turned to Lily, who was frozen beside me, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. I looked back at him and stepped forward. What do you mean they're after her? What did you do? He hesitated, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair like they were the only things keeping him upright. I didn't think they'd come this far, he muttered. Back when the business was failing, I took money. Not just borrowed, stolen. From people who don't file paperwork. They wanted collateral. I didn't have anything left, so I gave them information. I felt my knees go weak. What kind of information? His voice dropped lower. About you. Your work. Where the kids went to school. Everything. They wanted clean identities. Ways to launder money. I told myself it was just names on paper. But now, I think they used it to create fake identities, maybe even worse. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear him. All this time, I thought the worst thing he'd done was lie, steal, manipulate. But this was something else. Something criminal. Something that dragged Lily into the center of it. He looked at her, guilt heavy in his voice. They used your name. Your identity. And now someone's made a mess under it, fraud, maybe more. If they think you're a loose end. I grabbed Lily's hand. She was shaking, her face pale. We're leaving, I said. We're going to the police. You should have told me this from the start. He didn't argue. He just nodded, his face gray. On the way out, I called a lawyer I knew from my court battle years ago and explained everything. She told me to bring Lily in immediately. Within an hour, we were sitting in her office while she made calls to federal authorities. The moment she looked at Lily's name in a secured database, her face changed. There's a flagged file, she said. Someone's been using her name for international transactions. This is serious. The next few days were a blur of investigations, interviews, and agents going through old files. It turned out everything he told us was true, but it was even worse than we thought. The fake identity linked to Lily had been used for financial crimes in 3 countries. If we hadn't uncovered it now, it could have ruined her life forever. They told us we got lucky, just in time. But the real twist came a week later. I got a call from the rehab center. He was gone. Vanished. No one saw him leave. No sign of forced exit. Nothing. Just an empty room and a missing file folder that had been kept under lock and key by staff, containing the original notes he gave law enforcement. And on my porch the next morning, there was a letter. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a single line written in his handwriting. I only told you part of the truth. Protect her. That was the last I ever heard from him. For days after the letter showed up, I kept reading that single line over and over. I only told you part of the truth. Protect her. It haunted me. I tried to convince myself that it was just his final way of pulling strings, of keeping some kind of control. But deep down, I knew he was trying to warn me. The kind of people he got involved with didn't just disappear. They shifted, hid in plain sight, and waited for the right moment to strike. I didn't know what part of the truth he'd kept from me. But I knew one thing. He was right about one thing. I had to protect Lily. Thankfully, with help from the investigators, we were able to clear her name. The stolen identity case went deeper than we imagined, part of a larger network of fraud operations using innocent names as shields. Because we had come forward before any major damage was tied directly to her, they worked fast to isolate the fake accounts and erase her from the system they had built under her name. It was a long process, but we got through it. she was safe. Her future was still hers. I ended up moving out of town, taking Lily with me. She needed a fresh start, and honestly, so did I. We found a small house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, somewhere with no history, no ghosts, no memories at every corner. She started her final year of school again with a clean slate. I watched her slowly become herself again, laughing more, sleeping better, trusting the world little by little. As for him, no one ever found out what happened. The police said they believed he had help leaving the center, maybe someone from his past, someone who still had unfinished business. I wondered if that final letter was his way of giving up, or running one last time. Part of me will always wonder. Maybe he really did want to protect Lily in the end. Or maybe he just didn't want his own secrets catching up with him. But I stopped chasing answers. I had spent too many years drowning in confusion, betrayal, and pain. Now I choose peace. I choose safety. I choose not to let the weight of the past control what's ahead of me. If there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when things fall apart. It's who protects you when the world gets dark. And for Lily, I'll always be that person, no matter what. We don't talk about him anymore. Not because we hate him, but because we've moved on. Some stories don't need a neat ending. Some people leave chapters unfinished. And sometimes, the best closure you'll ever get is learning to live without needing all the answers. That's our story. Twisted, messy, painful, but also one that led to healing, truth, and a kind of freedom we never saw coming. And that's more than enough.